Along this tree, gods descend from heaven to earth, and descend from earth to heaven, like people on stairs in their homes. There is neither shadow nor echo in this place, for here is the center of heaven and earth, where all roads of the visible and invisible worlds converge. Beside that sacred tree grows another, smaller in size but no less important. On its branches, which spread in all directions like solar rays, the sun rests at night. Each branch can withstand the weight of the celestial body, for they were created by the power of Mother Night herself. There was a time when not one, but 10 sons lived on this tree. 10 twin brothers, sons of the great goddess, Night. They were alike as drops of morning dew, and each had his own name, known only to their mother and the highest gods. The eldest of the brothers was called Yang, which meant first light. The youngest, Mo Guang, last ray. The rest had names associated with different shades of solar radiance. For many millennia, a strict order was established. Each day, one of the brothers would harness a golden chariot drawn by 6 winged horses with fiery manes and set out on a journey across the sky. The other 9 waited on the tree branches for their turn. When one brother completed his daily journey and returned to the tree, the next was already preparing for flight. People on earth, looking up, thought that the same sun always shone upon them, for the brothers were so similar that even the sharpest eye could not notice the difference between them. Only Mother Night knew which of her sons worked when, and she was proud of their obedience and order. But after many thousands and thousands of years, this strict schedule became quite tiresome to the Sun Brothers. The eldest, Yang, was the first to complain. He said when they all gathered together during shift changes, "If you enjoy this kind of content and want to hear more fascinating stories, make sure to subscribe and leave a like, but only if you're genuinely interested. Get ready for the story. And to those listening before bed, I already wish you sweet dreams. Why must we fly alone? Are we not equal among ourselves?" The second brother, Zhao Ming, which meant morning radiance, supported the eldest. "You speak the truth, brother. Every day the same road, the same clouds, the same horizon. And the sky is so vast. Why don't we all fly together and see what's there, beyond those distant stars?" The third brother, Zhongri, midday heat, added, "And the people on earth are so small, they don't even notice our work. What would change if we slightly disrupted this boring order?" So they spoke quietly, so that Mother Night wouldn't hear when she came to check if everyone was in their places. And the youngest, Mo Guang, who was always the most mischievous, whispered, "What if we forget about this chariot altogether? Why do we need the road we've flown for thousands of years? Is there little space in the sky for all of us?" And one morning, when Mother Night went about her business to the distant star gardens, the brothers gathered on the highest branch of the tree and finally agreed. "Enough of being slaves to schedule. Today we'll show everyone what true freedom is." "Let's all fly together," exclaimed Jiang. "Let the people on earth see 10 suns at once," laughed Zhao Ming. "Let's throw a real celebration in the sky," supported Zhongri. And with the first glimmers of dawn, all 10 brothers rose from the tree with noise and laughter. It swayed from their united takeoff. Its roots shuddered, and waves passed through the earth. In distant lands, people woke from the unusual trembling, and beasts in the forests raised their heads alertly, frolicking like small children who were left without parental supervision for the first time. The suns scattered across the sky, each in their own direction. Some rushed to northern lands, others to southern ones. Some decided to survey western territories, others flew east, and some simply circled over one place, playing with clouds. And in vain did Mother Night, returning home and seeing the empty tree, cry after them, "What are you doing, my unreasonable children? Return immediately. You don't know what you're causing." but her voice was lost in the celestial spaces, and her sons, drunk with freedom, didn't want to hear anything. The sky blazed with 10 suns, and this radiance was unbearable. Where once gentle, golden light from a single celestial body had reigned, now burned the blinding flames of 10. The air heated to such a degree that it seemed the very atmosphere was ready to ignite. A terrible drought descended upon the world. Water from rivers began evaporating at such speed that lake levels dropped by the hour. Great rivers that had flowed for millennia transformed into shallow streams, then dried completely, leaving behind cracked beds covered with whitish salt. The forests caught fire. First dry leaves smoldered, then branches ignited, and soon entire trees blazed. Fire spread with the speed of wind, leaping from crown to crown, transforming green expanses into seas of flame. Suffocating smoke spread across the earth in thick clouds, shrouding the world in a veil of ashen gray. Wild beasts fled from forest thickets, forgetting their savage nature. Deer raced alongside foxes. Wolves paid no heed to rabbits, and bears walked shoulder to shoulder with boars. All had one goal: to find salvation in rivers and lakes. But even the rivers boiled from the unbearable solar heat. River water bubbled like in an enormous cauldron, raising clouds of steam. Fish, unable to withstand the heat, floated belly up. First individual fish, then entire schools, and finally all aquatic life. The riverbanks were strewn with silvery carcasses that gleamed under the merciless rays of 10 suns. Birds that tried to rise into the sky had their wings singed and fell from above as charred lumps. Their feathers caught fire in mid-flight, and the birds themselves, shrieking in pain, plummeted to earth like stones. The sky, once filled with cheerful song and the flutter of wings, was now empty and ominous. But people suffered most of all. Crowds of humans, blackened by unbearable heat, gathered on the plains, away from the burning forests. Their hair was singed, their skin reddened and peeled, and their eyes watered from smoke and heat. Children wept, but their tears evaporated instantly, not having time to flow down their cheeks. Elders who remembered many calamities said that such horror had never occurred in all of human history. Young people lost strength and collapsed right in the middle of the steppes, unable to withstand the hellish heat. Wise priests tried to understand what sin had angered the gods, so that they had sent such punishment. Beating stone gongs, waving spears, and raising shields skyward, people cried with all their might, hoping to frighten the celestial lights. Some lit great fires, thinking their own fire would drive away the heavenly fire. Others, conversely, poured onto the earth what water they still had, trying to cool the scorching ground. "Have mercy, great lights," cried some. "Return to your tree," pleaded others. "At least one of you should disappear," shouted the third in despair. But the sons frolicked and did not hear the clamor. Or perhaps they thought people were rejoicing, watching their antics. The brothers called to each other, laughing at how strangely the tiny creatures below behaved. "Look," said Zhou Yang. "They're lighting fires. Perhaps they want to imitate us, and these are waving their arms," replied Zhao Ming. "Surely they're greeting us. How fun it must be for them to see us all together," laughed the youngest, Mo Guang. Meanwhile, anxiety reigned in the heavens. The great sovereign, highest of all gods, sat on his jade throne and observed what was happening on earth through a magic mirror. His long white beard trembled with anger, and his eyes, usually calm and wise, burned with righteous indignation. "Foolish children," he thundered in a voice that resounded like thunder through all the heavens. "They will destroy all life on earth with their game." Around the throne gathered other gods. The goddess of earth wept, looking at the burned forests and dead animals. The god of rivers complained that his domains were drying up. The god of winds told how his gentle breezes transformed into scorching whirlwinds from the unbearable heat. "Something must be done," they implored the great sovereign. "A little more, and nothing living will remain on earth. The great sovereign pondered deeply. He could have ordered the 10 sons to return, but knew they, heated by their game, would not obey. He could have flown down himself and forced them to order. But this would mean leaving the heavenly throne unguarded, which was unacceptable. Then he remembered his most devoted warrior, the archer, with a short name, Yi. This was a celestial bowman whose arrows never missed, and whose bow could pierce any obstacle. Yi had served the great sovereign for many millennia, and always accomplished the most difficult tasks. Yi, called the sovereign, and his voice rang through all the halls of the heavenly palace. In a moment, a tall man in simple but sturdy clothing appeared before the throne. His face was stern but kind, his eyes sharp as a falcon's, and his hands strong from many years of training with the bow. Behind his back hung a simple leather quiver, and in his hand he held an ordinary wooden bow. "My lord." He bowed his head. "I am ready to carry out any command of yours." The great sovereign took from the wall his personal red bow, a weapon created at the dawn of the world, from the wood of the sacred tree, and adorned with jade and gold. Then he took 10 white arrows with points forged from celestial metal that could pierce even solar flame. "Take this weapon, Yi," the sovereign spoke solemnly. "Fly to earth and do what is necessary. But remember, at least one sun must always shine on earth. Otherwise, it will perish from cold and darkness." Yi took the red bow and 10 white arrows, placed them in his quiver, and bowed. "It shall be done, my lord," spreading behind his back great wings that were usually invisible. The heavenly throne and rushed down to earth, where people suffered, and all living creatures died from the heat. When Yi arrived on earth, the scene that unfolded before him was horrifying. The ground, cracked from the heat, looked like a massive slab, covered with thousands of deep fissures. Vapor rose from these cracks like breath from a dragon's maw. The air shimmered with heat, distorting every outline, and it seemed the entire world was melting. Many people had already died from the heat and thirst. Their bodies lay in the open under the sky, for burial was impossible. The earth had become hard as stone. Those who remained alive had hidden in deep caves and underground shelters where the rays of the 10 suns could not reach. Hearing unfamiliar footsteps on the scorched earth, people cautiously poked their heads out of the caves, seeing a man with a bow walking calmly under the unbearable rays. They realized this was no ordinary person. "Who are you, stranger?" asked one of the bravest. "How can you stand under these suns without burning?" "I am the archer Yi," replied the bowman. "The great sovereign of heaven sent me to end this disaster." People began emerging from their shelters. Though the heat was unbearable, they wanted to see the one who had come to help them. Children hid behind adults' backs, while elders who remembered ancient legends bowed in reverence before the heavenly messenger. Yi raised his eyes to the sky where 10 suns raced about recklessly. They called to each other with voices like the ringing of silver bells, and seemed completely unaware of how much suffering their game was causing. The archer removed the red bow of the great sovereign from his shoulders. The bow gleamed in his hands as if alive, and the bowstring tightened itself, sensing the touch of masterful fingers. He drew the first white arrow from his quiver. It was light as a feather, but its tip gleamed with the cold brilliance of celestial metal. "Forgive me, Zheyang, eldest of brothers," whispered Yi, knowing the names of all 10 sons. "But your game has brought too much suffering." He knocked the arrow and drew the bowstring with all his might. The muscles of his arms, trained by years of practice, tensed, and the arrow itself trembled with eagerness, ready for flight. The arrow flew into the sky, leaving a silver trail behind. The people watching from below saw it reach the largest of the 10 suns. Suddenly there was a deafening explosion, as if a huge crimson bladder had burst. The sun blazed especially bright, then began to dim, and finally disappeared completely, scattering into thousands of golden sparks. The 9 remaining suns suddenly stopped their game and cried out in terror. Only now did they understand that their antics were dangerous not only for the earth, but for themselves as well. "Our brother has perished," cried Zhao Ming. "Who dared to shoot at us?" howled Zhongri. "But we are the sons of the goddess Night," shrieked the youngest, Mo Guang, but Yi had already prepared his second arrow. Again he drew the bow. Again he aimed and released. The second arrow reached Zhao Ming, and he too burst like a ball of fire, scattering into countless tiny flames. People rejoiced and encouraged the archer with shouts. "More! More!" they cried. "Shoot them all! Save us from this horror. You are our only hope." The 8 remaining sons tried to flee, scattering in different directions, but Yi's arrows caught up with them one by one. The third son tried to hide behind a cloud, but the arrow pierced the cloud through and hit its target. The fourth rushed toward the horizon, but couldn't escape. The arrow was faster. The fifth son tried to fly as high as possible, all the way to the stars, but celestial arrows could fly at any altitude. The sixth darted from side to side. The seventh spun like a top. The eighth tried to hide behind the ninth son, all in vain. Yi shot calmly and accurately. As always, each of his arrows found its mark, and each son burst, leaving behind only golden sparks that slowly faded in the air. People counted aloud. 3, 4, 5. With each vanished sun, it became cooler on earth. The air began to move, creating the first gentle breeze in many days. Rivers stopped boiling, and the heat gradually retreated. 6, 7, 8. The ninth son, seeing the fate of all its brothers, rushed toward the sacred tree where their mother dwelt. But Yi's arrow caught up with it too. It also burst and scattered. Now only one son remained in the sky, the youngest. Mo Guang. It darted across the sky like a frightened bird, and its rays had grown pale with terror. It no longer shone with golden light, but trembled with a pale, almost colorless glow. People shouted, "Kill the last one too. Let the earth be dark, but let there be no more of this heat." Yi raised his bow and prepared for the final shot. One last arrow remained in his quiver, and he knew it would not miss. But suddenly someone gently touched his arm. It was the wise ruler Yao, one of the most renowned sovereigns on earth. He had long observed the archer's hunt, and understood what the common people in their anger and despair did not. "Stop, heavenly archer." Yao spoke quietly, but firmly. "If you kill this last son too, eternal darkness will engulf the earth. People will die of cold. Plants will wither without light, and beasts will find no food." Yi lowered his bow and looked at the wise ruler. In Yao's eyes he saw not only understanding, but wisdom that comes only from years of living among people. "You are right, sage." Yi nodded. "I became carried away in battle. My task was to save the earth, not destroy it completely." Quietly, so no one would notice, Yao approached the archer's quiver and pulled out the last white arrow. He hid it in the sleeves of his robe, and Yi pretended not to notice. In the sky, the last sun darted about in terror. It was still pale with fear and afraid to follow its usual path. It rushed from corner to corner of the sky like a mouse chased by a cat. "Come, archer," said Yao. "Show the heavenly light that it need not fear." Yi raised his hands to the sky and called out, "Mo Guang, youngest of Night's sons, I killed your brothers not from malice, but from necessity. Return to your mother, but know from now on you must fly alone, and only on the path your ancestors flew. If you are obedient, no one will harm you again." The last son heard these words and, trembling, flew to the sacred tree. There it threw itself into the arms of its mother Night, who wept with grief at losing 9 sons. "My only one," she whispered, pressing her last child to her breast. "Promise me you will never break the order again." promise you will fly only when your turn comes, and only on the path designated for you." "I promise, Mother," the frightened son babbled. "I will never play around again. I will be obedient." And from that day, the last son does not dare stray from its designated path or linger long in the sky. It rises in the morning, follows its course across the heavens, and in the evening hides beyond the horizon. And at night, Mother Night spreads her black cloak studded with stars across the sky, and the world rests from the daylight. After the great hunt of the 10 sons, the name of Archer Yi became renowned throughout the land. People composed songs and legends about him, telling children tales of the heavenly archer who saved the world from destruction. In temples they brought him offerings, and rulers from distant lands sent rich gifts. Archer Yi accomplished many more feats after that famous day. He defeated the dragon Jiulong, which had devastated the banks of the great river. This dragon had 9 heads and breathed poisonous fire, but Yi's arrows found the only vulnerable spot on its neck, and the monster fell dead. Then Yi overcame the giant boar Feng Shi, which destroyed entire villages with its tusks, as long as spears. The boar was so huge that when it ran, the earth shook as during an earthquake. But the archer ambushed it at a watering hole and pierced the beast's heart with a single arrow. He also destroyed the enormous serpent, Jiasu, which dwelt in a lake and devoured all who dared approach the water. The snake was as thick as a tree trunk and as long as an entire field, but Yi shot it straight in the eye, and it sank forever into the lake's depths. After each victory, the archer's fame grew. But this brought him no happiness. The gods did not grant him the reward he had hoped for. The great ruler, though satisfied with the completion of the task, did not invite Yi to return to the heavens. Other gods, seeing how easily he had killed 9 sons, began to fear his power and avoided meeting with him. But worst of all, his wife abandoned him. Her name was Chang'e, and she was the most beautiful woman on earth. Her hair was black as night, her eyes shone like stars, and her voice rang more melodiously than a nightingale's song. When Yi returned home after hunting the sons, she initially rejoiced in his fame, but fame is fickle, and great deeds are quickly forgotten. The people saved from destruction gradually stopped sending gifts. Rulers who once invited Yi to places of honor found new heroes to glorify, and the monsters that had terrorized people were gone, with no new heroic deeds in sight. Chang'e, accustomed to luxury and respect, complained more and more often. "Other men grow rich through trade and farming, while all you know how to do is shoot arrows. When we were young, this seemed romantic, but now I want real prosperity." Yi tried to earn money differently. He attempted trading, but had no understanding of it. He tried craftsmanship, but his hands, which had held a bow for thousands of years, would not obey him in delicate work. He even tried teaching others archery, but there were few students, and they paid little. Chang'e grew increasingly distant from her husband. She spent her days dreaming of a better life, and often gazed at the moon, imagining herself there, among heavenly palaces, where everything was covered in silver and precious stones. Then Yi learned about the elixir of immortality. This was a potion brewed by the Queen Mother of the West, who lived on the highest mountain in the world. This elixir could make a person immortal, but it could only be obtained by passing countless trials. The road to the Queen Mother of the West lay through deserts and mountains, where wild beasts and evil spirits dwelt. One had to cross 7 great rivers and traverse 9 mountain passes. On the last pass lived a 3-headed giant who let no one pass without battle. Yi prepared for the journey and told his wife, "If I obtain the elixir of immortality, we will both become immortal and can live forever in prosperity and happiness. Wait for me." Chang'e only nodded, but in her heart she thought, "If he brings this elixir, I won't share it with him. I'll drink it myself and fly to the moon, or I'll become a goddess." Yi's journey lasted 7 long months. He truly overcame all obstacles, defeated the three-headed giant, and reached the palace of the Queen Mother of the West. She, seeing his courage and determination, gave him a small jade bottle with the elixir of immortality. "This elixir is enough for 2 people," she said, "but if one person drinks it all, that person will not only become immortal, but will also be able to fly and live in the heavens." When Yi returned home, he was exhausted from the long journey and countless battles. Chang Yi greeted him with feigned joy, but her eyes burned with greed when she saw the jade bottle. "Rest, my dear," she said. "We'll save the elixir for better times." Yi, weary, fell asleep, and Changmei quietly took the bottle and drank the elixir to the last drop. Feeling her body become light as a feather, she flew out the window and rushed to the moon to become a goddess there and live in luxury. Awakening and finding the empty bottle, Yi understood what had happened. He left the house and gazed long at the moon, where his wife now dwelt. He never saw her again. After this betrayal, Yi became even more solitary. Servants, seeing that he had no wealth and could not support them well, left his house one by one. Friends who had once sought his company for the sake of fame now avoided meetings, for Yi had become gloomy and taciturn. In the twilight of his life, the great archer who had once saved the world remained almost alone in his house. Only one servant did not abandon him, a young man named Fenmen, but he remained not out of loyalty to his master, but from his own selfish considerations. Fenmen was a short but stocky young man of about 25. His hair was black and curly, his eyes brown and cunning, and a false smile always played across his face. He had not come to Yi by chance, but with a carefully calculated plan. In Fengmen's native village, everyone knew him as an envious and ambitious boy. Even as a child, he could not bear to watch other children receive praise for their skills. If someone shot a bow skillfully, Fengmen would try to shoot better. If someone ran fast, he would train to outrun them. But what irritated him most was that no matter how hard he tried, there was always someone better than him. In the village lived an old hunter named Hu, who could hit a tree leaf with an arrow from 100 paces away. No matter how much Fengmen practiced, he could never repeat this feat. When news came of the great deeds of the archer Yi, Fengmen realized he had found what he had been searching for all his life. He sold his father's land, left his wife and children, and set out for the distant city where Yi lived. Seeing the poverty in which the former hero lived, Fengmen rejoiced. This meant that Yi might need a servant, and thus Fengmen could become close to him and learn his art. "Master Yi," he said, bowing to the ground, "I have come from far away to serve you. I have heard of your deeds and wish to be beside such a great hero." He looked at the young man and saw sincerity in his eyes. At least, so it seemed to him. In reality, Fengmen had long ago learned to hide his true thoughts behind a mask of politeness. "I am not wealthy," said Yi. "I cannot pay you much." "I do not need money," replied Fengmen. "For me it is a great honor simply to be near you." He agreed to take him into service. Fengmen proved to be a hard-working servant. He cleaned the house, prepared food, tended the garden, but most often he asked his master to tell him about his old deeds. "Tell me, Master Yi, how you shot down the 10 sons," he would ask in the evenings, when they sat in the courtyard beneath the stars. Yi would tell the stories, and Fengmen listened attentively, memorizing every detail. He was especially interested in exactly how to hold the bow, how to aim, how to breathe during a shot. "Could you perhaps teach me archery?" Fengmen finally asked, after a month of service. Yi was silent for a long time. He rarely took disciples, for he knew how dangerous weapons could be in the wrong hands. But Fengmen seemed sincere and devoted to him. "Archery is not just a skill," he finally said. "It is a path that changes a person. Are you certain you are ready to walk it?" Yes, teacher, replied Fenmen, while thinking to himself, I will learn all his secrets and become better than him. But Yi was in no hurry. He wanted to first get to know his future student better. Tell me about yourself, Fenmen, he requested. Where are you from? Why did you leave your home? Fenmen had prepared his answer in advance. I was born into a poor peasant family, teacher. My parents died of illness when I was still young. I have neither wife nor children, so I can devote myself entirely to learning. All of this was a lie. In reality, Fengmen's parents were alive, and his wife and children waited for him at home, hoping he would return with money. But Yi believed this story, for he himself was lonely and understood that loneliness. Very well, he said at last, but the training will be long and difficult. Are you ready for that? Ready for anything, teacher. Yi nodded and went into the house, while Fenmen remained in the courtyard, gazing at the stars and imagining himself as the greatest archer in the world. He is old, thought Fenmen, and I am young and strong. I will learn everything he knows, and then we shall see who is the true master. That night, Yi could not fall asleep for a long time. Something about Fengmen's behavior troubled him, but he could not understand what exactly. The young man seemed devoted and hard-working, but sometimes in his eyes Yi noticed a gleam that he did not like. Perhaps I am too suspicious, thought the old archer. My wife's betrayal has made me distrustful of people, and this boy probably truly wants to learn and serve me faithfully. But deep in his heart, he felt anxiety. His experience told him that a person who promises devotion too easily often proves to be the greatest traitor. The next morning Yi decided to begin the training, but he would do so carefully, gradually testing his student's character. Today we shall begin your training, said Yi. But do not think I will give you bow and arrows right away. True archery begins not with the hands, but with the eyes and soul. Fengmen was slightly disappointed, but did not show it. First of all, he continued, an archer must learn to look without blinking. The eyes are an archer's most important weapon. If you blink at the moment of shooting, the arrow will miss its target. How long must one not blink? Asked Fenmen. Until it becomes as natural as breathing. When you master this, come to me. Returning home, Fenmen began to practice. He lay beside his wife's weaving loom and spent entire days staring at the spinning paddles. At first his eyes watered and burned, his eyelids involuntarily closing. But Fenmen was determined and did not give up. His wife, seeing such strange behavior, became worried. What is wrong with you, husband? Why are you acting so strangely? I am learning a great art, replied Fenmen. Do not disturb me. After a week, his wife noticed that her husband could indeed stare at the moving petals without blinking for even an hour. Then Fenmen asked her, when I am staring at the petals, suddenly bring a needle or awl close to my face. Do it unexpectedly, so I cannot prepare. His wife thought her husband had completely lost his mind, but obeyed. She would bring a sharp needle to his face as if to pierce his eye. But he continued staring without blinking. When Fengmen's eyes grew accustomed to this too, he ran to Yi. Master, I have learned. Look. Yi stood before the young man with open eyes for a full hour, not blinking once. Then he raised his hand as if to strike him in the face. But even then, Fenmen did not blink. Not bad, nodded Yi, but this is only the first step. Now give me a bow and arrows. Too early, said Yi, smiling. A good archer must also be able to see a very small thing as if it were large, and something completely invisible to the eye is significant. When you can do this, come back. Fenmen was disappointed again, but remained calm outwardly. At home, He thought long about how to accomplish this task. Finally, an idea came to him. He caught the tiniest flea in the yard and tied it with the finest hair plucked from a bull's tail. Then he attached this hair to the ceiling and began training. Lying on his bed, Fenmen spent entire days staring at the flea. At first he saw only a tiny black speck, but gradually, straining his vision, he began to make out small details. He spent many days without drink or food, afraid to look away from the flea. His wife, seeing that her husband lay motionless staring at the ceiling, decided he was ill. "Go get the healer," she asked a neighbor. "My husband is acting strangely." "I'll kill the first person who enters here," shouted Fenmen without turning his head. His wife stopped and burst into tears. She did not understand what had happened to her husband, but was afraid to interfere with him. The next day Fenmen cried out joyfully, "Look, woman, now the flea has become like a button." His wife approached him and looked where he was looking. She saw only a tiny black speck on the hair, but dared not tell her husband this. "May I bring you drink and food?" she asked carefully. "Too early," replied Fenmen. "I'll tell you myself when I can make out his eyes and mouth." And again his wife wept. For what eyes and mouth could a button have? But she continued to wait and bring her husband at least a little water when he allowed it. 3 more days passed, and Fenmen cried out again. "Now it has become like a wheel, and its mouth is bigger than mine. Bring me food and drink, or it will swallow me." His wife brought him rice and water. Fenmen quickly ate and drank without taking his eyes from the ceiling, then immediately ran to his master. "Master," he shouted from afar, "I have completed your task." He came out to meet him and looked at Fenmen. The young man's eyes were red from strain, but blazed with triumph. "Show me," said Yi. Fenmen led him to his house and showed him the flea on the hair. "What do you see?" asked Yi. "I see a great monster with huge eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth," replied Fenmen. "It wants to eat me, but I am not afraid." Yi nodded. He knew this was true. The young man had indeed learned to see the small as large. "Now I will teach you to shoot," Yi exclaimed joyfully. They went to a field outside the city. There Yi took out 2 bows, his own and an old training bow he had once used when he was a student. "Let us begin with the basics," said Yi. "Shooting begins not with drawing the bowstring, but with proper stance." He showed Fenmen how to stand. Feet shoulder-width apart, left foot slightly forward, back straight. Then he taught him to hold the bow. Left hand extended, holding the bow by the grip, right hand holding the string. The first days Fenmen learned to draw the bow without an arrow. His hands trembled from strain and his muscles ached, but he did not complain and carefully repeated all the movements after his teacher. "Archery is not about strength," Yi explained. "It is technique, rhythm, and inner harmony. Your heart, breathing, and hands must work as one." After a week, Yi allowed Fenmen to take a real arrow. The target was simple: a large sack of hay 20 paces away. The first arrow flew wide. So did the second. The third hit the ground near the target. But Fenmen did not give up. Day after day he practiced, and gradually his accuracy improved. In a month he could hit the sack from 50 paces. In 2 months, from 100. Yi was pleased with his student's progress, and gradually made the tasks more difficult. "Now shoot at this leaf," he said, pointing to an oak leaf on a tree. "At a leaf? But it's so small." "Remember your training with the flea. For you, this leaf should be as large as a shield." Fenmen concentrated, applied everything he had learned, and shot. The arrow pierced the leaf exactly through the middle. Each day the tasks became more complex. Yi taught Fenmen to shoot at moving targets, to shoot against the wind, to shoot from difficult positions. The young man proved to be a very capable student and quickly mastered all the lessons. After a year of training, Fenmen became a truly masterful archer. He could hit a coin at 200 paces, could split a hair in half with a flying arrow, could knock a ripe apple from a branch without touching the leaves. Throughout the Middle Kingdom, people began speaking of master and servant as the greatest archers, placing their names side by side. People came from far away to watch their skill and paid handsomely for the spectacle. But as Fengmeng's skill grew, something else grew within his heart: jealousy toward his teacher. At first it was barely noticeable, but gradually it transformed into genuine hatred. Fengmeng should have rejoiced and thanked his teacher for the instruction, but he was envious by nature from birth. Now, when people praised his mastery, he no longer wanted to share the glory with Yi. The young man considered himself superior to his teacher, since Yi was old while he himself was young and strong. Why do people always mention his name alongside mine? Fengmeng thought. Don't I deserve separate glory? After all, now I shoot no worse than him, and perhaps even better. Jealousy blazed in Fengmeng's soul like flames in dried bushes. He began watching his teacher's every movement, searching for weaknesses. He noticed that Yi's hands sometimes trembled with age, that his breathing was not as steady as before. He's growing weak, Fengmeng thought, while I'm becoming stronger. Why shouldn't I take his place? Fengmeng began devising a plan to eliminate his teacher. At first he wanted simply to leave Yi and go to distant lands, where he would become famous on his own. But then he realized that as long as Yi lived, people would always remember that it was Yi who had taught Fengmeng archery. No, the young man decided. I must act differently. If Yi dies and I remain alive, everyone will think I was the superior student who surpassed his teacher. Fengmeng began preparing for his crime. He acquired a new quiver, larger than Yi's, and filled it with the finest arrows. He also crafted a new bow, stronger and more flexible than his teacher's bow. Meanwhile, Yi suspected nothing. He rejoiced in his student's progress, and took pride in having passed his art to the younger generation. Sometimes it seemed to him that Fengmeng looked at him strangely, but the old archer attributed this to the usual ambition of youth. One day, when they were returning from the field, after another training session, Fengmeng decided the time had come to act. They walked along a narrow path through the forest, where no one could see them. Teacher, Fengmeng suddenly said, stopping, what would happen if our arrows collided in midair? Yi turned in surprise. What a strange question. Why'd? I'm just curious. They say that true masters can knock down arrows with other arrows. That's true. Yi nodded. But why would we do such a thing? For the sake of learning. Fengmeng smiled, and suddenly shot an arrow straight into the empty sky. Yi didn't even have time to wonder at such strange behavior. Before instinctively grabbing his bow, knocking an arrow, and sending it after the first, a crack rang out. The two arrows collided in midair and fell to the ground in fragments. Why did you do that? Yi asked. But Fengmeng had already prepared a second arrow. Again came the whistle. Again, Yi responded with his own arrow, and again they collided in midair. The same happened with the third, fourth, fifth arrows. Only now did Yi understand what was happening. Fengmeng wasn't simply playing, he was challenging him to mortal combat. The young man had far more arrows in his quiver than the teacher, and he was counting on this advantage. But soon Yi's arrows were truly exhausted, while Fengmeng still had more than a dozen left. The traitor smiled and stepped aside to get a better angle for his shot. Farewell, teacher, he said with mocking politeness. You've taught me everything you knew. Now it's the student's turn to show that he's better than his teacher. Before Yi could move, Fengmeng drew his bow and released an arrow. It flew whistling from the string and struck Yi directly in the mouth. The archer Yi staggered and fell to the ground. Fengmeng approached closer to make sure his teacher was dead. In his heart he felt triumph. Finally he had rid himself of the one who interfered with his glory. Now he would be the only great archer in all the land. But as soon as Fengmeng drew near the body, Yi suddenly rose, whole, and unharmed. Sweat broke out on the traitor's forehead. His hands shook with terror, and he dropped his bow to the ground. "You decided to kill me too soon," Yi said calmly, spitting out the arrow's point. "After all, I hadn't yet taught you the most important thing, how to catch and bite through arrows with your mouth." Fenmen fell to his knees and grasped his master's legs. "Forgive me, teacher," he babbled. An evil spirit of jealousy, he pushed Fenmen away and picked up his bow. With one motion, he broke the weapon across his knee and threw the pieces at the traitor's feet. "Get out of my sight," he exclaimed. "A traitor will never be a good archer. Your jealousy has poisoned your art, and now you won't be able to hit even a sack at close range." And indeed, from that day forward, Fenmen lost his skill. His hands trembled when he took up a bow. His eyes couldn't focus on targets, and his arrows flew astray. Jealousy and betrayal had destroyed everything he had learned during long months of training. Fenmen fled to distant lands where no one knew his story. There he tried to find a new teacher, but no master wanted to instruct him after seeing how poorly he handled a bow, and those who didn't know the truth quickly became disappointed in a student who couldn't even draw a bowstring without trembling. Fenmen spent the rest of his life in poverty and solitude, cursing the day when jealousy had taken hold of his heart. He realized that with his own hands he had destroyed his talent and his future. And Yi returned home even lonelier than before. His student's betrayal struck him harder than his wife's betrayal. He never again took students and spent his days remembering his ancient deeds. When his time came, the great archer Yi died quietly in his home, holding in his hands the red bow once given to him by the great ruler of heaven. And people long remembered and told the story of the hero who saved the world from 10 sons, but could not save himself from human treachery. Thus ends the tale of Yi the archer, of his glory and his tragedy. They say that the red bow and white arrows, with which he shot down the suns from the sky, are still kept somewhere in the celestial treasuries. And when great disasters befall the earth, the gods remember their faithful warrior, and regret that there is no longer such a masterful archer. Some say that Yi's soul still wanders the world, seeking justice and punishing traitors. Others believe that he is reborn from time to time, when humanity needs a hero, and the youngest son, Mo Guang, still remembers that terrible day when his brothers perished. That is why it still fears to fly too high or shine too brightly, lest it anger the gods and encounter the celestial archer once again. Thus the ages pass, and the memory of deeds and mistakes is passed down from generation to generation, so that people may remember. True strength lies not in mastery of weapons, but in purity of heart. And a hero's most terrible enemy may not be a monster or a natural disaster, but the envy and betrayal of those he trusted.